It was on a crisp autumn morning that fate decided to pull back the curtain on these hidden truths. The day began like any other for Officer Ryan Thompson, a 12-year veteran of the Millbrook Police Department. At 38, Thompson was a man who carried himself with the confidence of someone who knew his place in the world. His close-cropped blonde hair and steely blue eyes gave him an air of authority that was reinforced by the badge gleaming on his chest. As Thompson climbed into his patrol car, he couldn't shake the feeling that today would be different. There was something in the air, a tension that seemed to crackle with each breath he took. Little did he know that his actions over the next few hours would set in motion a chain of events that would change not only his life, but the entire fabric of Millbrook society. Across town, another day was beginning for Special Agent Alexis Washington. At 34, Agent Washington was a woman who commanded respect in any room she entered. Her intelligence shone in her deep brown eyes, and her elegant bearing spoke of a lifetime of overcoming obstacles and exceeding expectations. As she prepared for what she thought would be a routine day of undercover work at the local community center, she had no idea that she was about to become the center of a storm that had been brewing for decades. The paths of Officer Thompson and Agent Washington were set to collide on Main Street in front of Millbrook's oldest bank, a stately brick building that had stood sentinel over the town's comings and goings for over a century. The events that would unfold there would expose the raw nerves of a community and force everyone to confront truths they had long tried to ignore. As Officer Thompson patrolled the streets of Millbrook, his mind wandered to the recent departmental meeting where Chief Anderson had stressed the importance of maintaining order and being vigilant against any potential threats to the community. The chief's words echoed in his ears. "We're the thin blue line between chaos and civility. Never forget that." Thompson took these words to heart, perhaps too much so. Over the years, he had developed a reputation for being tough on crime, a no-nonsense officer who didn't hesitate to assert his authority. Some praised him for keeping the streets safe, while others whispered about his heavy-handed tactics, especially when dealing with minorities. As he turned onto Main Street, Thompson noticed a sleek black Audi parked in front of the bank. The car stood out in a town where most people drove pickup trucks or modest sedans. His suspicion immediately piqued. Thompson pulled over and got out of his patrol car to investigate. Agent Washington had just finished withdrawing some cash for her undercover work. As she exited the bank, she was preoccupied with thoughts of her ongoing investigation into a suspected drug trafficking ring operating in the area. The case was complex, with potential links to local law enforcement, and she knew she had to tread carefully. Lost in thought, Agent Washington didn't immediately notice Officer Thompson approaching her car. It wasn't until she heard his gruff voice that she snapped back to reality. Officer Thompson had approached the vehicle with caution, his hand resting instinctively on his holster. The sight of a well-dressed black woman climbing into an expensive car in this part of town immediately set off alarm bells in his mind. Years of ingrained biases and stereotypes clouded his judgment, leading him to assume the worst without any evidence. What happened next would be recounted dozens of times in the days and weeks to follow, each retelling adding layers of shock, outrage, and disbelief to the narrative. Officer Thompson demanded to see Agent Washington's license and registration, his tone brusque and accusatory. Agent Washington, taken aback by the officer's aggressive demeanor, calmly asked why she was being stopped. This simple question seemed to ignite something in Thompson, causing his demeanor to shift from suspicious to openly hostile. What followed was a display of power and prejudice that would shake the community to its core. Officer Thompson, without provocation, ordered Agent Washington out of her vehicle. His voice dripped with condescension as he questioned how someone like her could afford such an expensive car. The implication was clear, and it cut Agent Washington to the quick. As a small crowd began to gather, drawn by the commotion, Officer Thompson's behavior became increasingly erratic. He demanded to search the vehicle, insinuating that Agent Washington must be involved in illegal activities. When she attempted to assert her rights and refused the search, Thompson's face contorted with anger. In a moment that would be seared into the memories of all who witnessed it, Officer Thompson roughly handcuffed Agent Washington, pushing her against the side of her car. The onlookers gasped in shock as they watched a woman they didn't recognize, but who carried herself with dignity and poise, being treated like a common criminal. Throughout the ordeal, Agent Washington maintained her composure, her years of FBI training kicking in even as she felt the cold bite of the handcuffs on her wrists. She knew that every word, every action was being recorded by the body camera on Officer Thompson's uniform. She also knew that her true identity as an FBI agent, carefully guarded during her time in Millbrook, was about to be revealed in the most dramatic way possible. As Officer Thompson began to search Agent Washington's purse, his hand froze as it closed around a leather wallet. Flipping it open, he found himself staring at a gleaming FBI badge. The color drained from his face as the reality of the situation crashed down upon him. The crowd, which had been watching in stunned silence, erupted into a flurry of whispers and exclamations. The revelation that the woman was an FBI agent spread through the onlookers like wildfire, adding another layer of shock to an already tense situation. For Special Agent Alexis Washington, the humiliation of being handcuffed and searched in public was overshadowed by a grim sense of purpose. As an FBI agent specializing in civil rights violations and corruption cases, she had seen incidents like this before. But experiencing it firsthand, feeling the weight of prejudice and abuse of power, brought a new dimension to her understanding of the issues she had dedicated her career to addressing. In the moments that followed, the street in front of Millbrook's oldest bank became ground zero for a seismic shift in the town's social landscape. As news of the incident spread, people from all corners of Millbrook began to converge on Main Street. The crowd swelled, a mix of anger, confusion, and curiosity palpable in the air. Officer Thompson, realizing the magnitude of his mistake, quickly removed the handcuffs from Agent Washington's wrists. His face was a mask of shock and growing fear as he began to comprehend the consequences of his actions. The confidence that had radiated from him just moments before had evaporated, replaced by a palpable sense of dread. Agent Washington, now free from the handcuffs, took control of the situation with a calm authority that commanded respect from everyone present. She identified herself to the growing crowd, her voice steady as she explained her role as an FBI agent working undercover in Millbrook. The revelation sent shockwaves through the assembled onlookers. Many in the crowd had never seen an FBI agent in person, let alone witnessed one being mistreated by local law enforcement. The incident forced them to confront the reality of racial profiling and police misconduct in a way they never had before. As the gravity of the situation settled over the crowd, a range of emotions played across their faces. Some expressed outrage at Officer Thompson's treatment of Agent Washington, while others seemed conflicted, struggling to reconcile their respect for law enforcement with the clear abuse of power they had just witnessed. In the midst of the chaos, Chief Anderson arrived on the scene, his face a mix of confusion and growing alarm as he took in the situation. He quickly pulled Officer Thompson aside, demanding an explanation for the unfolding crisis. Meanwhile, Agent Washington calmly began to address the crowd, her words measured and purposeful. She spoke of the importance of community, of the need for trust between law enforcement and the citizens they serve. But she also didn't shy away from addressing the ugly reality of racial profiling and the abuse of power that had just been on full display. As she spoke, a hush fell over the crowd. Even those who had initially been skeptical of her claims found themselves moved by her words. Agent Washington's ability to remain composed in the face of such blatant discrimination was a powerful testament to her character and training. In the days that followed, the incident on Main Street would become a catalyst for change in Millbrook. The video from Officer Thompson's body camera, which captured the entire encounter in stark detail, would be viewed thousands of times, sparking heated debates about race, power, and justice in America. The story quickly spread beyond the borders of Millbrook, attracting national media attention. News vans descended on the small city, their satellite dishes stretching towards the sky like metal sunflowers. Reporters prowled the streets, eager to capture every angle of the unfolding drama. For Officer Ryan Thompson, The consequences of his actions were swift and severe. He was immediately placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. As he sat in his home, watching the news coverage of the incident, the weight of his actions began to crush him. The man who had once walked the streets of Millbrook with such confidence now found himself a pariah, avoided by former friends and colleagues alike. Chief Anderson, for his part, was left to deal with the fallout. He called an emergency press conference, standing before a sea of microphones and cameras to address the incident. His words were careful, diplomatic, as he promised a full and impartial investigation into Officer Thompson's conduct. But for many in Millbrook, these assurances rang hollow. The incident had exposed a deep-seated problem that could no longer be ignored. Protest marches began to spring up, with citizens demanding accountability and change within the police department. Special Agent Alexis Washington found herself at the center of a whirlwind. Her identity as an FBI agent investigating potential corruption within local law enforcement made her a lightning rod for both praise and criticism. She was invited to speak at town hall meetings, church gatherings, and school assemblies, where she shared her experiences and outlined her vision for a more just and equitable society. As the weeks passed, the initial shock of the incident began to give way to a period of reflection and, ultimately, action. The Millbrook Police Department, under intense scrutiny from both the public and federal authorities, began to implement sweeping reforms. New training programs were introduced, focusing on de-escalation techniques and cultural sensitivity. An independent civilian oversight committee was established to review police conduct and ensure accountability. For many in Millbrook, this period of change was uncomfortable and at times contentious. Long-held beliefs and prejudices were challenged, forcing people to confront their own biases and preconceptions. Heated debates erupted at town meetings, in coffee shops, and around dinner tables, as the community grappled with its past and tried to chart a course for the future. Through it all, Agent Washington remained a steady presence, working tirelessly to facilitate dialogue and understanding. Her unique perspective as both a victim of racial profiling and a federal agent tasked with upholding the law gave her words added weight and credibility. As the investigation into Officer Thompson's conduct progressed, more troubling details began to emerge. It became clear that the incident with Agent Washington was not an isolated event, but rather part of a pattern of behavior that had gone unchecked for years. Other members of the community, particularly people of color, began to come forward with their own stories of mistreatment at the hands of local law enforcement. The revelations sent shockwaves through Millbrook. Many residents who had initially defended Officer Thompson and the police department were forced to confront the uncomfortable truth that systemic racism and abuse of power had taken root in their community. Meanwhile, Agent Washington's undercover investigation into the suspected drug trafficking ring began to yield results. As she delved deeper into the case, she uncovered evidence suggesting that corruption within the Millbrook Police Department went far beyond Officer Thompson's actions. There were indications that some officers were not only turning a blind eye to the drug trade, but actively participating in it. The scope of the investigation expanded, drawing in resources from the FBI's field office in Omaha. Agent Washington found herself working around the clock, balancing her role as a catalyst for change in the community with her duties as a federal investigator. As the months passed, signs of progress began to emerge. The police department, under new leadership, started to rebuild trust with the community. Officer Thompson, after a thorough investigation, was ultimately dismissed from the force and faced criminal charges for his actions. While some saw this as a necessary step towards accountability, others viewed it as an overcorrection, highlighting the complex and often divisive nature of the changes taking place. The drug trafficking investigation also bore fruit, leading to a series of high-profile arrests that included not only local dealers, but also several corrupt police officers. The scope of the operation stunned the community, forcing everyone to confront the reality that the problems in Millbrook ran much deeper than they had initially believed. 1 year after the incident on Main Street, Millbrook had undergone a transformation. The town that had once prided itself on its close-knit community had been forced to confront the ugly truths that had long simmered beneath the surface. The process had been painful, but necessary. Special Agent Alexis Washington, standing before a packed auditorium at the Millbrook Community Center, reflected on the journey the town had undergone. The crowd before her was a diverse mix of faces, a visual representation of the changes that had taken place. As she spoke of hope, of progress, and of the work still to be done, Agent Washington couldn't help but think back to that fateful day in front of the bank. The humiliation and anger she had felt in that moment had been transformed into a powerful force for change. The incident that had threatened to tear Millbrook apart had in the end brought the community closer together. It had forced people to have difficult conversations, to challenge their own assumptions, and to work towards a more just and equitable society. As Agent Washington concluded her speech, the applause that filled the auditorium was more than just a polite gesture. It was an affirmation of the journey the town had undertaken and a commitment to continue the work of building a better future. Outside the community center, the streets of Millbrook bustled with activity. The town had changed in ways both visible and intangible. New businesses had sprung up, owned by a more diverse group of entrepreneurs. The police force, once a source of tension, was now seen as a partner in community building. But perhaps the most significant change was in the hearts and minds of Millbrook's citizens. The incident that had exposed the town's deepest flaws had also revealed its capacity for growth and change. As the sun set over Millbrook, casting long shadows across Main Street, there was a sense of cautious optimism in the air. The town had faced its demons and emerged stronger for it. The road ahead was still long, and there would undoubtedly be more challenges to face. But for now, at least, hope. The story of Millbrook, of Officer Thompson and Agent Washington, would be told and retold for years to come. It would serve as a reminder of the power of individual actions to spark widespread change, and of the importance of confronting injustice wherever it may be found. As night fell, and the streets of Millbrook grew quiet, the town settled into a new normal. It was a place forever changed by a single incident, a community that had looked into the abyss of its own prejudices and chosen to forge a new path. For Special Agent Alexis Washington, the journey was far from over. Her work as an FBI agent would continue, taking her to other communities facing similar challenges. But now, she carried with her the knowledge that change was possible, that even in the darkest moments, there was potential for growth and redemption. And so, as Millbrook slept, the promise of a new day hung in the air. A day that would dawn on a town forever altered, forever aware of the power of justice, compassion, and the unyielding human spirit. The incident on Main Street had been a turning point, but it was just the beginning of a longer journey. In the months and years that followed, Millbrook would continue to grapple with issues of race, justice, and equality. The changes that had been set in motion would face challenges and setbacks, but the foundation for a more inclusive and just community had been laid. The Millbrook Police Department underwent a complete overhaul. Under the guidance of a new chief, recruited from outside the department to bring a fresh perspective, policies were rewritten, training programs were revamped, and a zero-tolerance policy for racial profiling and excessive use of force was implemented. Body cameras became mandatory for all officers, and a civilian review board was established to investigate complaints against the police. These changes weren't always easy to implement. Some veteran officers resisted, clinging to old ways of thinking and operating. There were growing pains as the department adjusted to new expectations and standards. But gradually, a new culture began to take root, one that emphasized community engagement, de-escalation, and equal treatment under the law. The effects of these changes rippled out into the community. Trust between law enforcement and Millbrook's minority communities, which had been severely damaged by the incident with Agent Washington and the subsequent revelations of corruption, began to slowly rebuild. Community policing initiatives were launched, with officers attending neighborhood meetings, participating in community events, and working to establish personal relationships with the residents they served. The changes in Millbrook extended far beyond law enforcement. The incident had sparked a broader conversation about race and inequality in the community. Local schools began to revise their curricula to include more diverse perspectives and to address issues of systemic racism. Businesses started diversity and inclusion initiatives, working to create more equitable hiring practices and workplace environments. Community organizations sprung up, dedicated to fostering dialogue and understanding between different racial and ethnic groups. Monthly town hall meetings became a forum for open and honest discussions about the challenges facing Millbrook and the steps needed to address them. For Special Agent Alexis Washington, the transformation of Millbrook was bittersweet. While she was proud of the changes that had been set in motion, she knew that her role in the community had to come to an end. Her undercover work had been compromised, and the FBI was reassigning her to a new case in another part of the country. Before she left, Agent Washington met with Chief Anderson one last time. The conversation was tense but productive. Anderson, who had initially been defensive about the incident, had come to recognize the need for change. He thanked Agent Washington for her role in exposing the problems within his department, acknowledging that while the process had been painful, it was ultimately necessary for the health of the community. As Agent Washington prepared to leave Millbrook, she reflected on the unexpected turn her assignment had taken. What had started as a routine investigation into drug trafficking had evolved into something much larger, a catalyst for social change that would impact the lives of thousands of people. She thought about Officer Ryan Thompson, the man whose actions had set this whole chain of events in motion. After his dismissal from the force, Thompson had fallen into a deep depression. The loss of his job and the public disgrace had taken a heavy toll on him and his family. But as the months passed, something unexpected happened. Thompson, forced to confront the consequences of his actions and the biases that had driven them, began a journey of self-reflection and education. He started attending diversity workshops and reading books about racial justice. Slowly, painfully, he began to understand the harm he had caused and the systemic issues that had shaped his worldview. In a move that surprised many, Thompson reached out to Agent Washington, asking to meet with her before she left town. The meeting was awkward at first, filled with tension and unspoken emotions, but as they talked, a tentative understanding began to form. Thompson apologized for his actions, not just the incident on Main Street, but for the years of biased policing that had preceded it. He spoke of his desire to make amends, to use his experience as a cautionary tale for other officers. Agent Washington listened carefully, recognizing the sincerity in his words while also understanding that actions, not just words, would be necessary for true redemption. As their meeting drew to a close, Thompson asked Agent Washington if she thought there was hope for someone like him, someone who had made such grave mistakes. Her response was measured but optimistic. She told him that change was possible, but it required ongoing commitment and hard work. She encouraged him to continue his journey of education and self-reflection, and to find ways to use his experiences to positively impact the community he had once sworn to protect. The conversation with Thompson left Agent Washington with a renewed sense of hope. If someone like him could begin to change, to recognize and confront their biases, then perhaps there was hope for broader societal change as well. As she drove out of Millbrook for the last time, Agent Washington's mind was filled with a mix of emotions. There was pride in what had been accomplished, sadness at leaving a community she had come to care for, and determination to carry the lessons she had learned into her future work. The sun was setting as she reached the city limits, casting a warm glow over the fields of corn and wheat that surrounded Millbrook. In her rearview mirror, she could see the town's water tower, its silhouette a reminder of the community she was leaving behind. Agent Washington knew that the story of Millbrook was far from over. The changes that had been set in motion would continue to unfold long after she was gone. There would be setbacks and challenges, moments of doubt and frustration. But there would also be progress, moments of triumph and connection that would slowly but surely move the community forward. As she merged onto the highway, leaving Millbrook behind, Agent Washington made a silent promise to herself. She would carry the lessons of this experience with her, using them to inform her work in other communities facing similar challenges. And someday, perhaps years down the road, she would return to Millbrook to see how far the town had come. Meanwhile, back in Millbrook, life continued to evolve. The incident that had once threatened to tear the community apart had become a rallying point, a shared experience that united people in their desire for positive change. In the years that followed, Millbrook would become known as a model for community policing and racial reconciliation. Law enforcement agencies from other parts of the country would send representatives to study the town's approach, hoping to replicate its success in their own communities. The Millbrook Community Center, where Agent Washington had given her final speech, became a hub for ongoing dialogue and education. Regular workshops and seminars were held, covering topics ranging from implicit bias to the history of racial inequality in America. These events drew participants from all walks of life, fostering understanding and empathy across racial and socioeconomic lines. The local school system also underwent significant changes. A new curriculum was developed that placed greater emphasis on diverse perspectives and critical thinking about social issues. Students were encouraged to engage in community service projects, fostering a sense of civic responsibility from a young age. Local businesses, recognizing the importance of diversity and inclusion, began to implement new hiring practices and create mentorship programs for underrepresented groups. The face of Millbrook's business community slowly began to change, becoming more reflective of the town's diverse population. Even the physical landscape of Millbrook began to transform. New parks and community spaces were created, designed with input from all sectors of the community to ensure they were welcoming and accessible to everyone. Public art installations celebrating the town's diversity and history of overcoming challenges began to appear, serving as visual reminders of how far Millbrook had come. The annual Millbrook Festival, once a relatively homogeneous affair, evolved into a vibrant celebration of the town's multicultural heritage. Food stalls offering cuisines from around the world stood alongside traditional American fare. Music and dance performances showcased the rich cultural tapestry that Millbrook had become. Of course, the path of progress was not always smooth. There were still incidents of bias and discrimination, moments when old prejudices resurfaced. But the difference now was in how the community responded. Instead of denial or defensiveness, there was a willingness to confront these issues head-on, to use them as opportunities for further growth and learning. The story of Ryan Thompson, the former officer whose actions had sparked the initial controversy, took an unexpected turn. After months of soul-searching and education, Thompson found a new purpose. He began speaking at police academies and law enforcement conferences, sharing his story as a cautionary tale and advocating for reform. Thompson's journey from disgraced officer to advocate for change was not universally embraced. Some saw his efforts as too little too late, while others accused him of betraying his former colleagues. But for many, Thompson's transformation was a powerful example of the potential for personal growth and redemption. As the years passed, the incident on Main Street began to take on an almost mythical quality in Millbrook's collective memory. It was remembered not just as a moment of crisis, but as the catalyst that had set the town on a new path. Children in Millbrook schools learned about the incident as part of their local history curriculum. They studied the events that led up to it, the aftermath, and the changes that followed. The story was presented not as a simple tale of heroes and villains, but as a complex narrative about systemic issues, personal responsibility, and the power of community action. On the 5th anniversary of the incident, a memorial was unveiled in front of the bank where it had all begun. The memorial, a simple stone plaque, bore an inscription that read, "On this spot, our community faced a moment of truth. From that moment, we chose to grow, to learn, and to build a better future together." The unveiling ceremony was attended by a cross-section of the Millbrook community. Old-timers who had lived through the events stood alongside young families who had moved to the town, attracted by its reputation for inclusivity and progressive policies. As the crowd dispersed after the ceremony, an elderly woman was overheard talking to her granddaughter. "You see, honey," she said, her voice filled with a mix of sadness and hope, Sometimes it takes a shock to wake people up. What happened that day was terrible, but look at all the good that's come from it. That's the thing about life. Even in the darkest moments, there's always a chance for light to break through. Her words seemed to capture the spirit of the new Millbrook, a community that had faced its demons, embraced change, and emerged stronger for it. Thousands of miles away, Special Agent Alexis Washington sat at her desk in the FBI field office, poring over files for her latest case. A news alert on her computer caught her eye. It was a story about the memorial unveiling in Millbrook. As she read the article, a small smile played across her lips. The memories of her time in Millbrook came flooding back. The fear and anger she had felt during the incident, the long hours of investigation that followed, the tense community meetings, and finally, the slow but steady progress towards change. She thought about the people she had met in Millbrook, Chief Anderson, who had initially resisted change but ultimately became a champion for reform. Ryan Thompson, the officer who had humiliated her but later found a path to redemption, and countless community members who had stood up and demanded better from their institutions and from each other. As she reflected on the impact of her work in Millbrook, Agent Washington felt a renewed sense of purpose. She knew that there were other communities out there facing similar challenges, other places where injustice and prejudice still held sway. But Millbrook had shown her that change was possible, that even the most entrenched systems could be transformed if people were willing to do the hard work of confronting their biases and reimagining their communities. With a deep breath, Agent Washington turned back to the files on her desk. The case she was working on now involved allegations of civil rights violations in a small town not unlike Millbrook. As she began to formulate her investigative strategy, she found herself drawing on the lessons she had learned during her time in Nebraska. Meanwhile, back in Millbrook, the work of building a more just and equitable community continued. The changes that had been set in motion 5 years earlier had taken root, but there was still much to be done. The Millbrook Police Department, once a source of tension and mistrust, had become a model for community-oriented policing. Under the leadership of Chief Maria Rodriguez, who had been appointed after Chief Anderson's retirement, the department had implemented a series of innovative programs designed to build stronger relationships between officers and the communities they served. One such program, dubbed Coffee with a Cop, had become a monthly fixture in Millbrook. Officers would set up shop in local cafes and community centers, inviting residents to sit down and chat over a cup of coffee. These informal meetings provided an opportunity for open dialogue, allowing community members to voice concerns and officers to explain their perspectives. Another initiative, the Youth Police Academy, aimed to build positive relationships between law enforcement and Millbrook's young people. The program offered high school students a behind-the-scenes look at police work, combining classroom instruction with hands-on activities. Many graduates of the program went on to pursue careers in law enforcement or related fields, helping to create a new generation of officers who reflected the diversity of the community they served. The Civilian Oversight Board, established in the wake of the incident with Agent Washington, had proven to be an effective tool for ensuring police accountability. The board, composed of community members from various backgrounds, reviewed all complaints against officers and had the power to recommend disciplinary action. Their work had helped to restore trust in the department and ensure that instances of misconduct were addressed swiftly and transparently. But the changes in Millbrook extended far beyond law enforcement. The incident had sparked a broader conversation about race and equity that touched every aspect of life in the community. The local school district had overhauled its curriculum, placing greater emphasis on diverse perspectives and critical thinking about social issues. History classes now included in-depth explorations of topics like the civil rights movement, the Native American experience, and the struggles of immigrant communities. Literature courses featured works by authors from a wide range of backgrounds, exposing students to diverse voices and experiences. The district had also implemented a restorative justice program, moving away from punitive disciplinary measures in favor of an approach that emphasized accountability, healing, and community building. The program had led to a significant reduction in suspensions and expulsions, particularly among students of color who had historically been disproportionately impacted by harsh disciplinary policies. Millbrook's business community had also undergone a transformation. A concerted effort had been made to support minority-owned businesses, with local banks offering special loan programs and the Chamber of Commerce providing mentorship and networking opportunities. As a result, Main Street, once dominated by white-owned businesses, now boasted a diverse array of shops and restaurants reflecting the town's multicultural makeup. The annual Millbrook Economic Summit, once focused primarily on attracting large corporations to the area, now placed equal emphasis on fostering local entrepreneurship and creating economic opportunities for marginalized communities. Panels on topics like bridging the racial wealth gap and creating inclusive workplaces had become staples of the event. Even the town's physical landscape had changed to reflect its commitment to inclusivity and social justice. The park where protesters had gathered in the days following the incident with Agent Washington had been renamed Unity Park, and now featured a series of murals depicting key moments in the civil rights movement, including a striking portrayal of the confrontation between Agent Washington and Officer Thompson. A new community center, built with funds raised through a grassroots campaign, offered a range of programs designed to bring different segments of the community together. Free English classes for immigrants, cultural exchange events, and intergenerational mentoring programs all help to foster understanding and build connections across racial and socioeconomic lines. But perhaps the most significant change in Millbrook was less tangible. It was a shift in the town's collective mindset, a growing recognition that the work of creating a just and equitable society was ongoing. Residents no longer saw issues of race and social justice as problems to be solved and then forgotten, but as integral parts of the community's identity and daily life. This shift was evident in the way Millbrook commemorated the anniversary of the incident each year. What had started as a somber day of reflection had evolved into a community-wide celebration of progress and recommitment to the work ahead. The day began with a mourning ceremony at the memorial plaque, where community leaders and ordinary citizens alike shared their reflections on how far Millbrook had come and the challenges that remained. This was followed by a series of workshops and panel discussions on various aspects of social justice and community building. The highlight of the day was the Unity Walk, a symbolic journey that traced the path of the original protests. Participants walked from the bank where the incident occurred to Unity Park, carrying signs that reflected both the progress made and the work still to be done. Black Lives Matter, Immigrant Rights are Human Rights, and Equity for All were common slogans, alongside more personal messages of hope and commitment. The day concluded with a community picnic in Unity Park, featuring food from local restaurants representing Millbrook's diverse culinary traditions. As the sun set, a local choir performed a specially commissioned piece that told the story of Millbrook's journey from conflict to reconciliation. As night fell and the festivities wound down, longtime residents found themselves reflecting on how much had changed. Martha Johnson, who had lived in Millbrook for over 70 years, summed up the sentiment of many when she said, "I never thought I'd see the day when our little town would become a beacon of hope for the rest of the country. It hasn't been easy, and we've still got a long way to go, but I'm proud of what we've accomplished." Indeed, Millbrook's transformation had not gone unnoticed. The town had become something of a case study for researchers and policymakers interested in community-led social change. Delegations from other towns and cities regularly visited Millbrook to learn about its approach to police reform, educational equity, and community engagement. But for all the progress that had been made, the people of Millbrook knew that their work was far from over. Pockets of resistance to change still existed, and there were ongoing debates about how best to address persistent inequalities in areas like housing and healthcare. Moreover, as Millbrook had become more diverse and progressive, it had also become a target for outside groups opposed to its inclusive policies. Right-wing media outlets occasionally ran stories portraying Millbrook as a cautionary tale of political correctness gone too far, and the town had to contend with occasional protests from conservative groups. Yet these challenges only seemed to strengthen Millbrook's resolve. Each new obstacle was met with the same spirit of determination and collective action that had characterized the town's response to the original incident. As Millbrook looked to the future, there was a sense of cautious optimism. The town had proven that meaningful change was possible, that a community could confront its deepest flaws and emerge stronger. But there was also a clear-eyed recognition of the work that lay ahead. In a speech at the most recent anniversary celebration, Mayor Sophia Chen, the first person of color to hold the office in Millbrook's history, captured this sentiment. 5 years ago, we were forced to confront some hard truths about our community. We chose to embrace that moment of reckoning, to use it as a catalyst for change. We've made remarkable progress, but our journey is far from over. The true measure of our success will be whether we can sustain this commitment to justice and equity for generations to come. As the crowd applauded Mayor Chen's words, there was a palpable sense of determination in the air. The people of Millbrook had seen what was possible when a community came together to demand change. They had experienced the hard work of confronting biases, rebuilding trust, and reimagining institutions, and they were ready to continue that work, no matter what challenges lay ahead. Thousands of miles away, in her FBI office, Agent Alexis Washington read about Millbrook's latest anniversary celebration. She felt a surge of pride mixed with a tinge of nostalgia. Her time in Millbrook had been brief, but its impact on her life and career had been profound. The lessons she had learned there about the power of community action, the importance of perseverance in the face of systemic challenges, and the potential for individual and collective transformation had shaped her approach to her work in the years since. As she closed the news article, Agent Washington's phone rang. It was her supervisor, calling about a new case. Another small town, another report of systemic discrimination and abuse of power. As she listened to the details, Agent Washington felt a familiar mix of determination and hope rising within her. She knew the road ahead would be difficult. Change never came easily, and there would always be those who resisted it. But she also knew that change was possible. Millbrook had shown her that. As she gathered her things and prepared to head out to her new assignment, Agent Washington allowed herself a small smile. Wherever this new case took her, whatever challenges she faced, she would carry with her the spirit of Millbrook. A testament to the power of justice, compassion, and the unyielding human spirit. And so, as one chapter in the ongoing story of America's struggle for equality and justice came to a close, another was just beginning. The work continued, in Millbrook and beyond, a never-ending journey toward a more perfect union.